Hello students, welcome to the pole science of class 12 arts, and today we will learn about the topic the status of UN in a unipolar world. That means what? Earlier it was a bipolar world. That means before 1991, when USSR was not disintegrated, it was a bipolar world. So after 1991 it has become a unipolar world. That means unipolar can be related to the presence of United States of America as the only superpower, and with the disintegration of USSR in the year 1991, this world has become a unipolar world. So today we will study about the status of the United Nations. What is the status actually in a unipolar world? In the present scenario, what is the current status, or what is the UN doing, or how is the work process of the United Nations? We will read about that. So let us proceed then. Not a great balance to the US power, its role. That means what? As the US is the only superpower left in this world, so the UN is not giving a greater balance to that, because no one is there to compete with the US in terms of technology, in terms of military. So the UN has served to bring us and the rest of the world into discussions. The first and foremost thing that the United Nations had actually done very positive is that out of many countries that are present in the world, suppose assume that 193 member states under the United Nations, what they have done, the United Nations has bring all the states or the countries together, and they have bring whole of the world or whole of the country present in the world into discussion. That means earlier, before the existence of the United Nations, before, that means prior to 1945, the system was not like this, and many countries among each other, if they had conflict earlier, they would go into the war. But nowadays, because of the presence of UN, or because of the UN, United Nations, that they are acting as a mediator, they are doing what? They are bringing any countries that have conflict among each other to the table of discussions. And who is listening to both of the countries' conflicts? The United Nations, of course. After that, US sees UN as an organization as serving the purpose in bringing together over 190 nations in dealing with conflict and social and economic development. So the first point was about the United Nations, but how does the United States actually sees UN as? That means what are the thinking or what are the thought of United States of America regarding UN? So United States of America assume UN as what? As an organization that is serving what? That is serving purpose in bringing together over 190 nations in dealing with conflict and social and economic development. That means the UN is doing what? According to the US mindset, the United Nations is actually bringing, you can say, all of the countries that are present in the world, or all of the countries that are mentioned as the member states. That means here it is written 190, over 190 countries are there, which the US believes that UN is such an organization that has been successful in bringing all these 190 plus countries to deal with their conflict. That means they will not go to the war straight, they will further have discussions, and that warlike situation could be resolved. So the UN is very successful in doing that according to the US mindset. And along with resolving conflict, they are also, the United Nations are also doing what? They are also looking after the social and economic development of all the member states of the United Nations. So two things they are doing. Number one is resolving the conflict, and number two is looking after the continuously after the economic development also and the social development also. That means financially also and related to the society also. The next point, to rest of the world, it provides an arena in which US attitude and policies are modified. So for the US, the UN is like that, but to the rest of the world, the UN is doing what? The United Nations is providing a arena in which US attitude and policies are modified. That means what? UN is also not favoring the United States according to the other or the rest of the world or the member countries. The UN is doing what? The UN is giving a platform by which, suppose if US is a superpower, that means in today's world, that means they cannot do what they wish to do. So this particular thing, who is actually making them to abide by these rules and regulations actually, so that the US before going or before wishing to attack any country cannot do it directly. So the UN has made mandatory for the US also, being a superpower also, the United Nations have made mandatory that the superpower like USA also cannot go to war straight away. They should have a discussions, or they should take the permissions prior of doing anything related to war. Then next point is, UN provides a space within which arguments against US attitudes and policies are heard, and compromises and concessions can be saved. So apart from giving them the US the platform of not going to war directly, so they are also made mandatory to abide by the rules and regulations set by the United Nations. Apart from that, the United Nations is also doing what? They are also listening to arguments against US attitudes and policies. For suppose, take the example of China. Suppose if China is raising some questions over the policies and attitudes of the United States, that means who will hear these arguments? If they are complaining, suppose a country like China is complaining about the US attitudes and policies, this will actually be done what? This will be actually heard by the United Nations, being the mediator. That means the middle person to resolve conflict. Suppose some conflict is there and China is continuously complaining about the policies that are not good for the rest of the world. So these arguments will be heard by whom? By the United Nations. And after that, what will be the outcome? The outcome will be that if these arguments are heard, after that compromise and concessions can be saved. Suppose it cannot be like that. If China is complaining about the US, particularly about 10 or 12 complaints are there regarding US. So after hearing the United Nations cannot resolve all the 10 complaints. Rather than what the United Nations will do, they will further compromise with some of the complaints, that China has also to compromise on certain situations, and they will also make the United States to compromise on a particular complaint being raised by the other countries. I have given example of China. So what will they do? They will first hear all the complaints or all the arguments against the US. After that, they will, as an outcome, they will do what? They will set certain compromise and concessions also. So these two things will be done, namely compromise and concessions, so that this will do what? This will not actually create conflict among each other, and this will actually help to resolve the conflict in a peaceful manner. So this is the main aim of UN. After that, next point, with disappearance of USSR, America stands only superpower. As I have told you earlier, that the UN, the status of UN or the position of UN in a unipolar world is like that only. So as the USSR had disintegrated in the year 1991, then who stood only the superpower as the superpower? America, United States of America. Its military and economic power allows it to ignore the UN. But here, as the United Nations is very much successful in making the US abide by them, that means what? America, if wishes, cannot do anything that they want. For that, they have to seek prior permission. But other factor is also there, that whatever the military and economic power is with the US, it allows actually to what? If they wish, they cannot do, but they can ignore, because of the fact that they are economically powerful also, and in terms of military also they are very much powerful. Within UN, influence of America is considerable, and within the United Nations, influence of America is considerable. That means what? If we want to understand about the hierarchy, that means America alone contributes around 35 to 40% contributions is done to the UN. So economically also they have a bit influence. That means they can have a say. If the other country is not successful in making the UN fall under their arguments or consideration, but United States of America can do that because it has certain kind of influence, because of the fact that financially it is contributing around 40% in the UN's annual budget. After that, it is the single largest contributor to the UN, as we have discussed earlier. That means it is the single largest. So you can assume by that only that if America is contributing 35 to 40%, the second country contributing the second country that comes in the list contributes only 7 to 8%. So this is the difference. After that, it has unmatched financial power. That means we are talking about the US. It has unmatched financial power because it has unmatched financial power, and it is for the same fact that it is actually the largest contributor to the UN. So UN is physically located in Washington, and one more thing why the United States of America has greater influence, because of the fact that the headquarters of the United Nations is located in United States of America's city, that is Washington DC, the capital. US has many nationals in the UN bureaucracy. That means what? In the United Nations members also, whoever the bureaucrats are there in the United Nations, in that member group also, many of the people belonging to that United Nations bureaucrats are from the origin of the United States. So all these factors are doing what? They are actually giving a certain upper hand over the United Nations. Why is America always considered or is always influential to the United Nations? After that, with veto power, US can find any resolution which harms its or its friends' interest. That means it is also the permanent member of UN Security Council, and with the veto power, if suppose 193 member countries and 5 permanent members are there, suppose assume that 4 permanent members are given support along with 193 members, and if the United States of America sees that it is harming its interest, that means its country's interest, or it is harming any of its friends' country's interest, then they will give what? The veto vote. So if any one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council give veto power, then that particular law will be cancelled. So with that also it has an advantage or upper hand over the United Nations. Clear? After that, considerable say in choice of Secretary General of the UN, and along with the veto power, while electing the Secretary General of the United Nations, the United States of America is having a certain amount of advantage. While electing, if it is giving preference of some name, then the United Nations is actually selecting or electing that particular Secretary General of the UN. So in this way we can say what? That while electing the Secretary General of the United Nations, the United States of America is actually giving preference, and the United Nations is listening to the United States of America in regard of this electing Secretary General of the United Nations. Lastly, US uses its power to split rest of the world and to reduce opposition to its policies. And one more policy, you can say it as demerit also, that US is actually doing what? US being the lonely superpower, it is doing what? First, it is splitting the rest of the world. That means it is dividing. Clear? It is separating, and to reduce opposition to its policies. So that why it is splitting or separating many of the opponent countries, so that whatever their policies they are bringing, so the other countries should not oppose that particular policy of the United States. For that they are separating first, then they are making many countries into their side. So if many countries are under the influence of the United States of America, then what will happen? If any policies they bring which can harm to other countries, they will actually not oppose. So minimum opposition if it is there, or minimum countries, if the minimum countries will oppose their policies, that will not harm their interests. So in this way it is actually utilizing its power in order to do whatever the policies they are bringing, it should reduce opposition. That means many countries should not oppose. So for that reason also it is splitting the rest of the world. Clear? So with that we come to the end of today's topic, and today we have read about the status of UN in a unipolar world, and along with that the UN in a unipolar world. That means firstly we have studied what is UN actually doing and what is the mindset of the United States of America regarding the UN, and also the status mindset of the rest of the world regarding UN. And after that, regarding, as we know that USA is the only superpower in the world, so what is USA doing with the United Nations? Is it abiding by the United Nations or not? Why the United States of America is having greater influence in the UN? Because of the fact that its headquarters is there in the United States of America. Then many bureaucrats or members that are in the United Nations are from America. Clear? And when the Secretary General of the United Nations is elected, it is being elected by the preference that is given by the United States of America. Then it has veto power. Then it is the single largest contributor in the UN budget, annual budget. Then if it comes to military and economy also, it is very much powerful in comparison to the other countries that are present in the world. So with all this fact, actually the UN is somehow not that much successful in controlling the United States of America. So with this, I hope that whatever the points we have read following under the topic the UN in a unipolar world and the status of UN in a unipolar world, it is now very much clear. And with this I will wind up today's topic. Thank you.